Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee. And first item on our agenda, any apologies for absence?
Yeah, from Councillor Nicola Matthews and Mike White, Chair.
All right.
Turn it off totally, yeah?
Blue, yeah.
Sorry? Sorry?
Online.
All right, beg your pardon. That was another one. Okay. Then item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Councillor Jones.
Can I ask Jonathan a question, actually, because it's a strange report. It's agenda item 8. We're not making a decision on it, but I was involved with getting it as a public footpath.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think members are still making. Will be asked to vote on the footpath reports, but if you were involved in councillor, then you could declare a personal interest if you think that would be appropriate.
Okay, it's not prejudicial though, so it'll just be personal.
No, that's right. It wouldn't be prejudicial, no.
Personal interest on agenda item 8.
Any others? No? Thank you. Right, item 3 then is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a true record, and that's on page 1 and 2. So page 1 and page 2. Somebody move that as a true record, please. Thank you very much. Item 4 then, are there any items for deferral or withdrawal? Anyone?
No, Chair.
None at all, thank you. So right, we move on to item 5, and that's the provisional tree preservation order at Rectory Cottage. Anything you wanted to add, Alan, or the report is before us?
No, Chair. It's
plenty. I'm not sure if anyone can hear, but I'm having problems with my sound.
Right, we can hear you. Yeah, but no. Okay, sure. Thank you. Well, we've seen the report previously, and before we discuss that, then we have two speakers wanted to address us, and Mr. Gordon and Mr. Coode. Got your 5 minutes. Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and well done to the members who braved yesterday's heavy rain for the site visit. My name is Richard Gordon, and I live at Ilston Green, a property directly affected by the proposed TPO. Yesterday's site visit would have shown members the position and scale of the hornbeam in question. As I've said previously, this is a fine tree, but it is a tree very much in the wrong place, as its growth potential makes it unacceptably large in the specific site circumstances. Had my previous neighbour who planted the tree realised this, he would have definitely planted it in a different place. Visiting Ilston, I'm sure members will have noticed that the village is surrounded by woodland and set in a valley abundant in trees. On the approach, the village is hidden by woodland. To the north is common land and privately owned land, both of which are heavily wooded. To the west, a nature reserve and privately owned land, again, both of which are heavily wooded. And to the south, Ilston Coombe, a heavily wooded valley, together with further private land, also wooded. All have a variety of well-established trees. In terms of positively contributing to environmental management, conservation and wildlife habitat, the village can stand proud supporting a wide range of flora and fauna. Removing this one tree will have little to no impact on the environment, wildlife conservation, or, as I will contend, the public amenity value. Guidance states that TPO should be used to protect selected trees if their removal would have a significant impact on the local environment and enjoyment by the public. Visitors, hopefully as with members yesterday to the village, regularly comment on the wonderful copper beech standing on the village green and the spreading oak and majestic horse chestnut alongside the village sign. No one I've met yet has ever been minded to comment on the hornbeam. The hornbeam in question is not of historical, commemorative or habitat importance and is not rare. Having only been planted some 40 years ago, it is still a young tree. but the problem it is already causing me, as pointed out in my letters of objection and previous statement to this committee, will not diminish over time. In fact, they will get significantly worse as the horn beam, now standing 40 foot tall with a similar spread, has the potential to double in height and width. In its current location, it will grow to be overwhelming in its proportions and will impact directly on our lives. Where I live is a family home, and my wife and I are long-established residents there. We have been there far longer than this particular tree. As we have no intention of moving elsewhere, managing the consequences of this tree, which is even now challenging, will get decidedly more difficult year on year as the tree gets bigger and we get older. We fear also that it will adversely impact on the value of our property. I note from the report to members that the tempo assess scores the tree at 19. However, guidance indicates that a tempo assessment is meant only to be a guide to decision making and merely recommends a course of action. So a tree scoring highly might not be included for protection purposes for reasons unconnected with its attributes. And the proposed planting of replacement trees would more than mitigate any considered loss, in my opinion. I would ask members, therefore, to strike a balance between the assessed public amenity of the tree and the compromises it cause our private amenity. As such, I would urge members not to agree to the application of the TPO, which would place significant restriction on the management of our property and will impact on the general well-being of both my wife and me. We appreciate and recognise our role as custodians of the environment, including the importance of trees. But this is not just about looking after a tree. As people, the effect on our lives needs your consideration, as we too need looking after. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you.
Yeah, over to me again. Thank you very much again for this opportunity for me to talk to you. My name's Chris and I own Rectory Cottage, where the hornbeam is located. I agree wholeheartedly with each and every point that Richard, my neighbour, has just raised. In addition to everything that was mentioned in the previous meeting, I'd also like to add these points. Firstly, as you saw for yourselves yesterday, I'm lucky enough to live in an area surrounded by trees. In my garden alone, I'm fortunate enough to have some 16 different varieties of trees, all planted by the previous owner. All of them are beautiful in their own way. Indeed, it was one of the deciding factors for me moving to this delightful village some 14 years ago. Behind and underneath and in the shadow of this hornbeam tree are 2 rowan trees and 1 oak tree. If this hornbeam was removed, it would allow these trees to grow and be maintained. Further behind is a sweet chestnut, an apple and a small leaf lime, all of which would benefit from the extra light. And it would give a pleasant ambience again to the amenity of the area. Pruning of the hornbeam involves great expense, and I've already had estimates in excess of £1,000 just to prune within the guidelines of this council. This is a yearly expense that I cannot afford. It also does not alleviate the problems my neighbour has just raised. I ask you again for permission to remove this tree to protect our beautiful homes that were there long before this tree was. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But who wishes to speak first? Oh, sorry, Vice Chair.
Go.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Alan, if the TPO is put on the tree and an agreement is reached that is cut back to a manageable size, I know the gentleman just said it's expensive, but is that a possibility?
Yes. With a TPO, we can control the pruning, whereas a tree in a conservation area is just the residents notify us what they want to do, and the only control we can put on it is by placing the TPO on it, and hence why we did. It can be pruned. Members yesterday would have seen that it's got a good branch structure, and a good reduction is quite possible on it.
Anyone else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Lewis, then Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'm on the fence on this one. I went to see it yesterday and got absolutely drenched. Very nice house, very nice. I like the ambience of the whole village. It is a very, very large tree at the moment, extremely large. My question is to the officer, if the gentleman hadn't applied to the council to cut it down, could he have just cut it and no TPO or nothing would have been said? Is there a conservation area that they have to apply to take a tree or take a hedge or a wall down? I'd just like some guidance on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, the property's in the conservation area. So all trees over 75 millimeters in diameter at sort of chest height is protected by the conservation area regulations. And if any work, if the owner wants to do any work to the tree, they have to notify us. It's not an application, it's a notice that they intend to do work. And the only way we can control it or put conditions on it or specify a replacement if they want to remove it is to TPO the tree.
Thank you. I actually went down on Sunday because I couldn't go to the site visit yesterday, so I didn't get wet. So I did have a good look at the tree and a very nice walk to Wilston Wood. So I did two things. I am very concerned about the tree. Yes, it is big, but as it says, we are the custodians. And there's a few examples of why they don't want the tree, about catkins, leaves and everything. But any tree sheds, if you look around the pavements at the moment, they're all covered in green, where the wind has blown leaves down and everything. So, I mean, where I live, there's an awful lot of trees, and we just regularly have to get rid of them out of our gutters and that. So that's not a reason to cut a tree down. I'm sorry, I don't think that I could support cutting a tree down when it can be controlled by a TPO, and the owners can actually then prune the tree to a more manageable size. But to cut a tree down just because it's causing a nuisance, I'm sorry, I can't agree with it.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Richard.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, actually, Chairman, I first find it strange that a tree is growing so big as this. And again, the pictures we were given last time around were 14 years out of date. Does something to me. I feel very sympathetic to the two applicants who've spoken very well today. As far as I'm concerned, it's only a tree. It's nothing special. And I think I would be happy to see it cut down.
Hands up? No? Okay. No. Yeah. Okay. I got no one else wishes to speak then, no? You sure? Okay, then you can see on page 3 there what the recommendation states, that the TPO at Rectory Cottage be confirmed without modification. So if we take a vote on that now, then please.
Yeah, Councillor Peter Black,
For.
Phil Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Sarah Keaton,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Richard Lewis,
Against.
Mark Tribe,
Against.
Andrew Williams,
For.
and Paul Lloyd.
And 4.
It's 8-4 2 against. Chair.
That's carried. Thank you very much. 8-4. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. And we move on to agenda item 6, and the first item on there you'll see on page 13 is in Pont Lliw, and that's yours, Ian. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Llandair. Okay, this application is referred to committee as a number of dwelling houses proposed meets the development threshold, and the application has been called by Councillor Holland and the objection threshold has been met as well. So full planning permission is sought for 31 residential units and associated infrastructure on land east of Clowder Road in Pont Lliw. Members just made aware that there is an update sheet for this item informing you that there's been a request made on behalf of the Community Council to the Welsh Government to call in the application for consideration by Welsh ministers. To date, we don't have a response or direction from Welsh Government, so I'm not aware that this precludes the item from being considered by committee at today's meeting. Also on the update sheet, there is a couple of late comments received from residents, and they've been included as well. Okay. The application is located on the eastern edge of the village of Pont Lliw, and the village lies about 3 kilometres from Pontedilys. The site itself contains a single agricultural field. Next slide, please. So this slide is the counterpart aerial image showing the location of the site within its wider setting. Whilst the site comprises a field, residential properties are located close by on the opposite side of the Clowder Road and to the west and northwest of the site. To the south and east are fields and hedgerows. To the northeast is a mature woodland and there's grazing land beyond. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the red line boundary and extent of the application site. It's about 1.67 in hectares. The plan allows you a better understanding of the pattern of development in the area. And for context, I've provided an extract of the LDP map, which shows in green the current settlement boundary around this part of the village. And Pont Lliw is designated as a key village in the LDP. Next slide, please. So here's the proposed site layout plan showing how the residential development would be laid out. The site would be served by a single vehicle access point to the west of Clowder Road, and a new pedestrian access would be provided just south of this, leading to a crossing to connect to the existing footway on the western side of Clowder Road. So the overall layout takes a broadly loose arrangement and a degree of informality. Units generally face outwards, and the proposed development will be a mix of 1-bed apartments and 2, 3 and 4 bed dwellings of mainly 2 stories in scale, but there are a few single-storey bungalows. Given the semi-rural character, the layout shows extensive green areas, mainly along the periphery, and there's an area of open play to the south, hedgerows and meadow gardens and trees. There's also attenuation basins and rain gardens forming part of the drainage strategy, together with new plantings, street trees, and a variety of other soft landscaping. Next slide, please. So there's a few different house types proposed, and here are 2 types of bungalows that would be provided. There's different contrasting in materials there. Next slide, please. Here is one of the proposed 2-storey dwellings. It's configured with an alternative external finish to add some interest and variety to the site. Next slide, please. Here are the other proposed 2-storey dwellings in the site. They're relatively simple in terms of their design and appearance, but complement the other proposed house types in this semi-rural context. Next slide, please. There are 2 blocks of flats proposed, and here's the first one, 2-storey pitch roof building with a single-storey wing and a few covered porches. This building would contain 5 1-bed units. Next slide, please. The second block is smaller and minus a rear wing and would contain 4 1-bed units. Both blocks are similar in scale and they're quite comparable to like a semi-detached dwelling or a small group of terrace properties. Next slide, please. The application has included an artist's impression of how it is envisaged that the site may look following completion of the development. And here are those 2 images with a counterpart plan showing the approximate direction of view. They don't hold any significant weight, but they give you some sort of an understanding of how the site might appear. Next slide, please. We've also got street scene sections, and the section on the top of the slide shows how the development may be viewed from Clowder Road, looking southeast. And on the bottom section shows the view along the new vehicle access road into the site, looking northeast. Next slide, please. So turning to the photographs, the site is accessed off Clowdale Road, and here's images of that road in the vicinity of Pont Lliw Primary School, and then near the entrance to a branching residential street called Hayola Park. And the Hayola Park is on the approach to a curve in the road where the corner of the site starts becoming visible. Next slide, please. When you go round that bend, there is a small group of residential properties on one side of the road. These are single-storey and two-storey. On the other side is the application site and is currently that field with hedgerows surrounding it. And beyond this point, the road gradually gets more rural in character. Next slide, please. So these are photographs taken further up Clowdale Road, looking at the other end of the application site. Skirting the northeastern boundary of the site is a private track which leads to a couple of properties and further fields. This track can be seen in the top photo, and then the other photo is along Clowdale Road travelling back towards into the village with a site on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So these two photographs focus on the application site itself, which is a field surrounded by hedgerows and a few trees. There is a gentle slope across the overall field and generally dips in the central part before rising towards Clowdale Road and the rearmost part of the site. Next slide, please. And the final photograph is taken from a relatively central part of the site, looking up towards Clowdale Road. In the backdrop, you can see the small number of properties located on the opposite side of the road, and then the more urban context behind it. Next slide, please. So permission is for 31 residential units and some infrastructure to go with it. It is a 100% affordable housing scheme. The site is currently designated as countryside within the LDP, and the application has been submitted based on the affordable housing exception site under policy H6. So the main issues for consideration relates to the principle of the development, impacts on the character and appearance of the area, including various environmental matters such as trees, biodiversity, ecology, impacts on access, parking and highway safety, impact on residential amenity and drainage and infrastructure. The report before you today is quite lengthy and comprehensive. It takes you through various relevant planning considerations, policies and guidelines. It draws upon a number of national and local policies in conjunction with a number of responses received from internal consultees and technical external consultees. Careful consideration has also been given to a number of responses received during the consultation period, which includes 5 letters of support, 71 letters of objection, plus the 2 late via the amendment sheet, and 2 petitions. It is a balanced report which weighs up all the relevant considerations, but concludes that the scheme is acceptable subject to a number of planning conditions and a legal agreement. Given the comprehensiveness of the reports, this presentation will not repeat all matters, but I will summarise a few matters for you. The site is in the countryside and there's a general presumption against residential development, except in exceptional circumstances. The proposal focuses on policy H6, which permits the principle of 100% affordable housing in the countryside, provided it satisfied the criteria of this policy. This policy forms part of an adopted strategy for delivering affordable housing in our areas, and such a route is available to applicants. The local policy is supported by national policy, which emphasised that there is an acute shortage of affordable housing, and a flexible approach is required to deliver more units. The strategic planning and placemaking section of the council has considered each criterion, and this has fed into the overall assessment of the proposal as detailed in the report. The council's housing department also has made representations explaining that the site falls within the Greater North West Strategic Housing Zone, where the local housing market assessment demonstrates a need for affordable housing. They've provided strategic support to the Housing Association for this scheme as part of a Welsh Government grant process. So the report concludes that policy H6 and its criteria has been reasonably met, and that the principle of development is acceptable in this particular instance. terms of visual amenity, the report has been thoroughly examined by the placemaking and design and drawing on technical comments made by the placemaking and heritage officer. The site will be developed sympathetically to the part urban and part rural context, and I hope this presentation and the photographs gives you a good understanding of what's before you today. It will include a lot of green infrastructure with the dwellings in the middle and set away from the boundaries so you can retain as much trees in the hedgerows and that kind of setting for it. It doesn't appear overly dense or intensive, and the mixture of bungalows and two-storey dwellings would be comparable with the types of properties that could be seen in that vicinity, and their appearance are also acceptable. So the report concludes that, subject to conditions, the scheme is acceptable in visual and placemaking terms. In terms of residential amenity, there are a small number of existing residential properties nearby. They are mainly opposite side of the Clowdhir Road, as I've shown in the presentation, and in Hale Park, but they will be buffered by trees and vegetation or by existing roads. The separation distance between the proposed and existing dwellings meet the recommended standards, and the report concludes that there won't be unreasonable adverse effect on these properties. All residential units would meet the Welsh Development Quality Standards set by Welsh Government. The layout of the site is not dense or intensive, and all the dwellings will have acceptable gardens. There are separation distance are largely recommended, with only a small instances where this is marginally below, but not unduly harmful to their overall amenities. Each of the proposed dwellings would be served by acceptable private amenity spaces, and there is a condition to remove permitted development rights. With regards to the one-bed apartments, there is a degree of communal amenity space being provided, and together with the wider open space being within the scheme, it is considered appropriate and adequate for their amenity. And the Council's Pollution Control Department raises no objections either. The application's been accompanied by various tree reports, landscape visual assessments, green infrastructure and landscaping plans. The tree officer raises no objections, subject to conditions. Whilst a section of the existing hedge will be removed to create the access and the visibility displays, large portions of the hedging will be retained and enhanced. Additional tree planting is also proposed as part of a comprehensive landscaping strategy. Ecological reports have been submitted, and it's noted that Nant y Crimp, site of special scientific interest, is about 150 metres away from the site, and there are a few sites of importance for nature conservation within a kilometre, but there is one that's nearby, and the council's ecologist and NRW have no objections subject to conditions. In terms of highways, there's been extensive discussions that have taken place during the course of assessing the applications, and highways have now concluded that the scheme on balance is acceptable, subject to various conditions and a financial contribution. Access to the site is off Clowdhir Road, as I've shown you, via Priority Junction. This section of Clowdhir Road is 20 miles an hour, and acceptable visibility displays can be achieved, subject to conditions. There are various paths within the site, and there is a safe pedestrian access to and from Clowdhir Road. Comprehensive swept path analysis have been provided from the access point through the internal carriageways, showing all to be suitable for vehicle movements, including a large refuse collection vehicle. Across the whole site, a total of 51 parking spaces are proposed. The Highway Authority acknowledges that there is a shortfall in car parking based on the guidelines. However, it will be a 100% affordable housing scheme and would be secured as such because it's an exceptional site. It'll be secured by a legal agreement. Because of the type of tenure, which involves lower car ownership generally, it means that on balance, the level of car parking proposed is acceptable in this instance, and the Highway Authority is satisfied with this approach, subject to a condition for the submission of a parking management plan. There is also a request for a financial contribution of 6,000 towards a review of traffic regulation orders and minor safety features. Whilst the provision of a TRO is subject to separate legislation, it is acknowledged that some existing capacity for on-street parking will be removed, but it is noted that the affected dwellings along this section of Cloudy Road, which is opposite the side access, have some form of on-street parking to begin with, and on balance does not raise an unreasonable detriment to their amenity. The site is not in a flood risk area, and the application is accompanied with a drainage strategy. The drainage officers have advised that a separate SUDS application will be required, but has not raised an objection. The site is in the vicinity of a combined sewage system, and Welsh Water also has no objections subject to conditions. The proposal generates the need for education contributions, and following consultation with the Education Department, there is a shortfall in Pontllew Primary School, but a contribution of about 75,000 is required. Similarly, there is insufficient capacity in Pontyddulais Comprehensive School, and to mitigate this, there's a contribution of around 98,000 required, and this would be secured by a legal agreement. The proposal being an exception site for residential development, a legal agreement is required to ensure that all residential units remain affordable in perpetuity and for local needs as well. In addition to this, the proposal requires on-street provision of open space, which is shown on the plans, and these would be secured by conditions. So having balanced all relevant guidelines, material considerations and policies, including a careful analysis of the technical comments that we've received from our consultees, internal and external, and those received from the public, the report concludes that the proposal meets the requirements of Policy H6 to be deemed an appropriate rural exception, which would make a valuable contribution to the delivery of affordable housing in the area. The proposal is also deemed on balance to satisfy all of the relevant material planning considerations. The report is to recommend approval subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. It's also requested that the delegated powers is provided to officers to refuse the application if the legal agreement is not completed within 3 months of any resolution to approve today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Chair, so before you go on, should have asked this at the beginning because Pontlleis Comprehensive School has been mentioned, and I'm a governor in the COM, so maybe a personal interest.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And then, but first, our first speaker then is Robert Bowen here. Online. Oh, thank you. There you are then. All right. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, Mr. Bowen. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Today I'm instructed to make representation on behalf of Pontllew and Tircoed Community Council. Can I first begin by stating that the Community Council fully supports the provision of affordable housing, subject to it being fully in accordance with local and national planning policy. As the planning officers indicated, both Policy H6 and Planning Policy Wales both support this form of development in the open countryside, but only where there is a specific and proven local need, a matter that I will come back to. The supporting evidence in the application relies solely on the housing officer's comments, who indicate an overall need within an enormous housing policy zone. The zone covers approximately 60 kilometres square, extends 8 kilometres north, 6 kilometres south, 3 kilometres west and 4 kilometres east. Within that assessment, there is therefore no assessment of local demand. The supporting information fails to contain any detailed assessment of housing need or availability of dwellings within Pontllew, and no evidence to indicate that indeed future occupiers of the proposed dwelling will be drawn from the adjacent communities of Pontllew and Tircoed. Policy H6 provides specific support for this application. However, it indicates that the development must be for local people. Committee, I would respectfully suggest that people living in distant settlements over 8 kilometres away, such as Gowerton, Gosainan, Gansult, cannot be deemed as being local people for the interpretation of the policy. And the law is quite clear also on the interpretation of what local should be interpreted as. Lord Justice Lang held in a decision that the purpose of rural exception policy was to provide affordable housing to meet local needs. Policy does not permit the affordable housing needs of local towns and settlements to be met by developing greenfield sites in small rural communities. In the absence of local evidence, the proposal is an unjustified form of development. The LDP seeks to provide 3,815 homes within the housing policy zone, and the 2022 annual monitoring report indicated that only 268 of 1,892 homes had been constructed. There is therefore a remaining capacity for over 3,500 dwellings within the housing zone. The information in support of the application provides no evidence to demonstrate why these 31 houses cannot be constructed in the allocated sites that this committee has allocated, with capacity for over 3,500 homes. The committee report indicates that within Pontliw, there are sites allocated or consented for 176 dwellings. This means that an affordable contribution of 26.4 affordable dwellings should come forward. Again, the information in support of the application provides no evidence to demonstrate why the 31 homes cannot be constructed within these allocated and consented sites within the defined settlement of Pontliw. To summarise, Chair and Committee, the applicant has provided no evidence to demonstrate local need. Moreover, there's no evidence to demonstrate that the future occupiers of these houses will be indeed local. The courts are clear on what local means. It means local and not people living up to 8 kilometres away from the site. The applicant has provided no evidence to demonstrate why affordable housing cannot be provided within allocated and consented sites within Pontliw. The applicant has provided no evidence to demonstrate why the affordable housing cannot be provided within the allocated sites allocated by this committee, which have provision for over 3,500 dwellings within settlements. The committee has just resolved to protect a single tree because of its visual and ecological value. Can I therefore respectfully request that this application is refused to protect valued, attractive, open countryside, because there is no evidence to justify this development in that attractive rural location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then I got Rob Davis for the applicant. You got your 5 minutes as well. Thank you.
Pnawn da, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rob Davis of Asbury Planning, and I represent Pobl Group as agent for the application. The proposals for the construction of 31 affordable homes on this site at the edge of the sustainable village of Pontliw. As officers have advised in their presentation and within the comprehensive report in front of you, the application represents a rural exception housing proposal which is supported as a matter of principle in both national policy and via Policy H6 in the adopted Swansea Local Development Plan. Policy H6 of the LDP specifically supports residential proposals on sites adjoining existing settlements where 100% of the dwellings are for affordable housing for local needs. It is on this basis that Pobl have submitted this application. Pobl have worked very closely with your officers from numerous departments for over 12 months to arrive at the scheme before you today. This has involved comprehensive pre-application discussions, which has resulted in refinement of the proposals to respond to technical and place-making comments. Pobl would like to thank officers for the professionalism shown throughout. Furthermore, and in advance of undertaking the mandatory PAC process,
that took place in June of last year, Pobl also undertook a public engagement event in Pontcew Village Hall in April of last year. This event was very well attended and provided Pobl with the opportunity to help to explain the proposals to the local community. The existing landscape has influenced the proposed master plan for the site. Through the consideration of a landscape appraisal, the designers were able to develop proposals that recognises the need for high quality, sustainable architecture with a multifunctional green infrastructure network. The local housing market assessment, which informed the LDP, identifies an affordable housing requirement of 7,400 dwellings across the county, with the majority need being for social rented dwellings. LDP policy H2 sets a target of delivering a minimum of 3,310 affordable homes via the planning system over the plan period. The most recent LDP annual monitoring report has indicated that for the fourth consecutive year since LDP adoption, the affordable housing target is not being met. In line with policy H6, this scheme proposes 31 affordable homes, positively contributing towards meeting housing need within the area. The application site falls within the Greater North West Strategic Housing Policy Zone, where there is a demonstrable need for affordable housing, with the highest need being for social rented tenure. This is supported by Pobl's own internal assessment in respect of need, which, based on the overall size of the scheme, identifies a solely rented scheme would be appropriate in terms of tenure. There is an unedited demand for the majority of property types, and thus the current mix put forward has sought to reflect this demand to provide sufficient variety. The Council's housing officer has confirmed this level of need. Demand for affordable rented housing is extremely high in all areas of Swansea, including Pontcew. Housing opportunities for families, single people and couples are severely limited. This scheme will provide opportunities for people to live in the community where they have a connection that otherwise they wouldn't have. This proposal represents a very important development for Pobl and will contribute towards their ambitions for delivering energy efficient, affordable homes for those most in need in Swansea. A significant amount of support and information and reports have accompanied the application submission. In terms of highway matters, we have undertaken extensive dialogue with the Highway Authority, carried out traffic surveys and updated those to reflect local residents' observations during the engagement event in terms of the timing of those surveys, and also undertaken a road safety audit to test the proposed arrangements. We agreed the Highways contribution sought to provide additional traffic regulation orders outside the primary school and other safety measures. All of the Section 106 contributions requested, including a 75,000 contribution towards Pontcew Primary School and 92,000 contribution towards Pontedilles Comprehensive School, are agreed to in order to achieve a high quality, sustainable development that meets the well-being objectives of the Welsh Government. There are no statutory consultee objections towards the scheme, and I would conclude and agree with your officers that the development is acceptable in all respects and meets the objectives of both Future Wales and your adopted local development plan. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Holland, did you wish to speak? Thank you. You've got your 3 minutes. Okay, manage.
Oh, how funny. Thank you very much. That's the end of everybody now using big words because I don't have any. Policies and strategies and rural develops and infrastructure. It's by a primary school. And reports can look how they want to look depending on where you measure traffic. I'd like to know what time of day the photos were taken, because that on a daily basis is my life. It is every morning residents getting in touch with me because it's just bedlam up there. And every village has got it, because we're a village that is not built for the amount of cars that we get coming into Pontlew, that we get dropping off. I really think and I know it's late in the day and I know it's a really big ask, but nothing on this paper is going to show you what going out there is. And if a site visit could be arranged late, that would be great, because I am worried that somebody is going to get hurt. And regardless of policies or planning, I can't have children being hurt. And I'm really, really worried about it. So I would love if everybody could come out, probably from the very first time Pobl came, Before pre-planning, I took the gentleman outside to show him because it was 3 o'clock and the village hall was bedlam and the road was bedlam, and it was just a case of, oh, cracking on anyway. So, you know, to go outside the village, the small amount of houses, we've got other things going on in Pontleu. We've got 2 other development areas. We've got a solar farm area. Surely those houses can fit into one of those places. I don't see. And I got, you are taking away, there's horses there. The kids see the horses on the way to school. We're talking about diversity and environmental things. I know people need places to live. And genuinely, if they were building these houses anywhere else in Pontleu, we would not be a committee. We'd be saying, great, much needed. You know, perhaps people need to move into the area, but not at the cost of the safety of children. I'm not willing to be on side with that, unfortunately. But if you guys could come out, and I know it's a really big ask, but I think you're going to see a bigger picture than what's just on a piece of paper. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got 2 speakers. First, Councillor Tribe and then Councillor Downing. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, all. I do have similar concerns, very similar to Councillor Holland's. The impact on Pontleu Primary School, which I believe is at capacity now. Also, Pontleu Comprehensive School, which is close to capacity, if not at capacity itself. What is the advantage of a tens of £1,000s grant to alleviate the problem of full capacity? I just can't see it. My second issue would be is the effect on traffic congestion. My daughter lives in Hendy. I know the area very well. I used to live in Pontleu. My daughter lives in Hendy. It takes her 40 minutes to drive through Hendy, through Pontardalis, through Pontleu, just to access Pentlegay roundabout. And this is just going to compound the situation. It's a nightmare. Infrastructure hasn't been given much thought, or they've been pretty particular about what times they're measuring the traffic. It's only one way in and one way out of Pontleu. And I am very concerned, and I don't think it's been addressed. These issues have been addressed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Chair. The closest I've got to this site is up Clodagh Road, turn right into Pontleu Park towards the football. So on Monday, I done a Mary Jones. I went on a separate day to drive up this area, and it slapped me up Penrell. If you remember the Penrell site that we had a site visit on, and we had a couple of things came out of it that weren't recommended by highways, and that's what slapped me straight away was the area. There's no pavements on the right hand side, and if we look at it, we may decide, oh, we'll put crossings or we'll put something there. But I agree with the local member for us to go and have a look at this, and then we can see for ourselves reactions to the report and the road. When I went there on Monday, obviously it is a school day. All the teachers are parked on the road. So these TROs then they're talking about are going to stop the teachers parking there. So where do teachers go? I know we say we don't care, they've got to find somewhere to park, but that's where they park now. Because when I went up there, I couldn't turn around. I had to go up into the lane, up to the first farm to turn around to come back down. So I am concerned about the infrastructure, highways. The rest of the site is exactly like Penrell, and it's exactly the same. And if it wasn't for the road, I couldn't see any way of actually turning this down, to be quite honest. But yeah, if we need somebody to move it, I move a site visit, Chair. Okay.
Thank you. Can I just add a word of caution? There's 12 of us on this committee, and it could potentially be 12 cars if we're going into school time, because we don't have a bus anymore.
Not
so
50, so 12 is good.
We would just add to the chaos there. So well, Councillor Holland wanted us to go to school time, so I think we have to look very, very carefully at what time we go if it's approved. They're mainly general questions, but first of all, it didn't mean all around highways, I hasten to add. It made mention of electric charging points, and I've tried to find in the report, and I presume it's for the blocks of flats and not for the individual houses. It's not quite clear. The other one is we didn't hear where the bus stop was, how far it was to walk. The other one was about refuse, and there's quite a bit about refuse. There's something from the objectors, and there is something in about highways and vehicles turning, and also the width of a large Luton type van going one way and a large estate car going the other way. So I know they are done to standard, but why are they in the report? And there doesn't seem to be any mitigation for those things. And a more general question, if you don't mind, I noticed it's a very nice looking site. There's nothing wrong with the site. I noticed they using block paving for the roads. Now, I've got a lot of block paving and quite a number of estates with me. And after they start to wear, they break up or they come up, they're uneven. Why are we using or encouraging maybe block paving? You know, it's that pink, red on the bricks. Bricks, that's the word. Well, they're paving, you know, it's the same thing, except it's not on the house, it's on the floor. So I'm just wondering, is it something we're moving forward with? And the last one is, it's a comment. We know it's an exceptional site because of what you said for affordable housing. But if that was a main builder, then it certainly wouldn't be allowed. And we need to bear that in mind as well. Thank you.
Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support the site visit because I think there are highway concerns which need to be addressed and we need to have a look at. And I noticed under the what page, I don't know what page I'm on here. Anyway, on one section, it talks about section 106 contributions, that the money which is being put aside, which I think is £6,000, is just to carry out a review of traffic regulation orders. So I'm just wondering, are we reviewing or are we actually introducing traffic regulation orders? I know it's about £3,000 to advertise for things. So, you know, clearly we need to make sure that if we review them, we need to be able to implement any changes with the money which is being made available then. The other question I wanted to ask, I think it's quite important in the context of the exception side. Could somebody please define local for me? Because I felt at one stage like I was in Vaston Roysey, or Roysey Bay, whatever it is, you know, in League of Gentlemen. Could somebody please define what local means in this context, please? Because I mean, you know, I consider Swansea to be quite a small city in which, you know, it's all local to us, you know, and if you're saying it's hit, you know, this is local and you don't want anybody from the east of Swansea, then I take exception to that. Yeah.
In the past, I mean, we did agree on the Summerland Lane, the parameters that we work to.
No, it's already moved and seconded. That's all I was going to say. The proposed site visit has been moved and seconded, so that's what I was going to.
Councillor Keaton, and then
Hi, yes, listening, I think we do need it. We do need some sort of site visit, don't we? Because I've got some questions here. One is that if there's a shortage of parking areas, is it on a good bus route? I mean, it's one thing to sort of say impose people not having cars, which is all right, but it's another to not be on a decent bus route. So I was going to ask that. Is there nearby parks for the children if there's family homes? And I was going to say, how far is the school to the family homes? It sounds like it's right on the doorsteps. That's answered, but it's other things, that the infrastructure, shops, doctors. I was wondering if the block paving was to help with drainage and part of the suds, if it can drain through rather than having concrete or tarmac. So those are a few of my questions. Thank you.
yeah, just on page 62, there's a bit of information there. The park, 240 meters, the bus stop 458, which is every half an hour. So yeah, there's a fair bit of info there, page 62. Anyway, well, we do that now if you like, but
That should be done soon.
we would, yeah, but I just chose in case. I understand. Yeah, I understand, but I thought there may be some points people could clarify. All right, well, we'll take that vote now then. It's been moved and seconded that there is a site visit and we can take that vote.
Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Sarah Keaton,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Richard Lewis,
I'm abstaining, Chairman, because I was out of the room at the start of the
Mark
meeting.
Tribe,
For.
Andrew William,
For.
Paul Lloyd.
Okay, 4, thank you.
That's unanimous. Oh, wait, 9-4-1 abstain, Chair.
We'll arrange that site visit. And thank you everyone for your contributions. And so then we move on to item 2, which is the Morver and Silverstack Bridges on Morver Road. And that's David and Stephen, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So item 2, application for listed building consent for the reconstruction of the 2 historic bridges, Morver Road, Silverstack bridges, which used to cross the old former Swansea disused canal adjacent to Howard Copper Works. Application for listed building consent, as I said, this is reported to Planning Committee as both the applicant and acts as the regulatory body. Obviously, the Planning and the Regeneration Division are one and the same, and therefore the listed building consent cannot be determined under delegated powers, and therefore it's reported to Planning Committee today. There's also a corresponding full plan application for the identical works, which will be determined under delegated powers. So the proposal forms part of the Levelling Up Fund for the regeneration of the Harvard Morver Copperworks area, which provides connectivity between Copperworks and the city centre and is referred to as the Lower Swansea Valley Levelling Up Project. So in the report, you will see there's detailed comments from the Council's Placemaking Heritage Lead Officer, Steve Smith. So I'll hand over to Steve to take you through the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you. Hello, councillors. On the screen here is the location of the 2 former canal bridges. Just to give you your bearings on this, this is orientated with the north to the side. So just to help you here, you've got the .com stadium to the northeast. Someone's highlighting with the cursor there. You've got the railway line to the west, which is top of the page because it's been turned sideways. And then you've got the River Tower to the south, down the bottom there, highlighted in blue. So there's some of your main kind of landmarks around this area here. And the area immediately to the east of the red line was the whole of the Havard and Morver Copperworks, which is part of the Shaping Swansea joint venture with Urban Splash, an allocated strategic development area within the LDP for heritage-led mixed-use developments. We've got the Penderyn Distillery immediately to the east as well, if someone's highlighting stuff. Yep, in that sort of broad area there, which obviously opened last summer. And within the red line, there was 2 canal bridges, and you probably wouldn't know that driving up and down the relatively new Morver Road. So, there's not much of Swansea Canal left in Swansea. There's sections up in Clydach that have been restored since the 1960s and ongoing restoration, with locks being restored at the moment. And this is a chance to bring some more of these features back to life in the city more prominently. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is what we've got at present. Again, north is this time to the left-hand side of the page. So sorry about the orientation here. This is something with the architects. It is marked on the plan there. So this is what you've got if you're driving up Morver Road, where there's an existing crossing point with the island there, crossing island, is remnants of 2 old bridges linking across, which would have, within living memory, been the entrance into the Copperworks. The blue building at the top of the page there is the Grade 2 listed laboratory building, which has listed building consent for shell restorations, also funded through the Levelling Up works, due to start later this summer into the autumn for the shell to be restored. So that's putting the building back together as an envelope, with planning consent in place for flexible commercial uses, such as office space or a restaurant. And that's the next phase of Copperworks regeneration, following on from Penderyn Distillery, which is literally just off the top of the page there. The bridges themselves are classed as what's called curtilage listed. So they're not identified as listed structures in their own right, but they're curtilage listed to the function and operation of the former Copperworks. And you've got what's kind of sort of visible on the ground there, but most of it's been hidden by the canal being infilled in the past. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is what we know was there. There's some really fantastic historic photographs. The one on the left is circa about 1920s when the canal was still in use. Just broadly to say, canal opened in 1798. There's currently events this year specifically about the 225th anniversary of the Swansea Canal by the Canal and Rivers Trust. It closed circa 1930. With bits of it infilled, and some of it's been lost completely. So by 1969, there was still a remnant of it there. That's again within living memory of the works before the copper works closed down, and it was all demolished. And these are the images here of what's known as the Morva Bridge, which is a masonry arch bridge. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is what's there at the moment from some archaeological excavations. Pretty much the kind of lower structure of the bridge remains intact with the bits above ground completely lost, and there's part of the arch there, but it's all broken and smashed. Next one, please. This is the other bridge, the one upstream to the north, completely different design, known as the Silver Stack Bridge, which was basically a metal deck bridge with stone pillars either side. Next slide, please. And this is what's left from basically completely buried in the ground from archaeological excavations. You know, the stonework below ground is in good condition, but everything above ground has been completely lost. And this is why it's a great opportunity to bring these features back. Next slide, please. So this is the proposal, again, with north to the left, effectively to create a whole new area of connected public realm. So you can access the copperworks from Morva Road, and also you can access the copperworks from the existing kind of wood-lined canal walk to the south there. So there will be access across both bridges for pedestrians and cyclists, entering into the copperworks site with various gates being put into the walls in historical locations, opening up that public realm area for east and west direction connectivity. And if one point to note, so there's no confusion, there's no proposal to reinstate the water, and there's no proposal to be able to actually walk underneath the bridges. So this is putting the bridges back to go over the top of them as features. The one other place there is an existing Swansea Canal Bridge in Swansea is Morriston, the eastern end of Morveth Street, which you can walk underneath there as part of a green corridor. So it's another project like that, but you can go over these bridges rather than under them. Next one, please. So these are the proposed elevations, if you want to call them that. That's existing and proposed, sorry. Top is the existing of what we showed you earlier there, pretty much has been buried in the past and kind of lost. The image at the bottom is putting that masonry arch bridge back together there, using appropriate brickwork for the arch and local pennant stone for the stonework there. And then the addition of a cycle 1.4 meter high safety handrail across the top. Next slide, please. These are the engineering drawings for putting the bridge back together, showing you a bit more what's going on here with these new handrails as well, and plus indication of cyclists using the bridge and all sorts of technical requirements for reinstating them, keeping that lower stonework in place and building new across the top. Next slide, please. This is the other bridge known as the Silver Stack Bridge, again, pretty much completely vanished at the moment if you were to look on site. Bottom image of what's being put back together. And what's quite interesting, some sort of very specific parts of the stonework have been saved from the 1960s and actually can be put back on the top of the pillar caps, the sort of the lids either side of the bridge there. The stonework have actually been kept, been reinstated. Everything else is completely new, a new steel deck that goes over there. And you can see the sort of sections here, you can't go underneath these, there's not headroom, and they'll be restricted. There'll be a metal mesh underneath to stop people going underneath. Next one, please. And again, these are the engineering drawings for putting the second bridge back together through that steel structure there. So that should be the end of the slide. So the point, just to remind everyone of the end of the slides there, is these are curtilage listed structures. They meet the tests, the proposals meet the tests set in legislation and our LDP policy HC2 for acceptable and appropriate alterations, if you want to call it that, or reinstatement of these curtilage listed bridges that effectively have been lost, but we know there's enough information to put them back together properly and thoroughly as replicas. And on that basis, listed building consent recommendation is for approval, as you heard earlier from David, with conditions to control the details, such as things like stonework and handrails and things like that. And because of the nature of listed building consent applications, this will have to be referred after decision to CADU for their final approval there, as up to yourselves. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. Remember, wish to speak, Councillor Black first then?
Yeah, just a question really. I mean, we're creating dead space underneath these bridges, which you say is going to be mesh going there. I do have concerns about that dead space. Obviously, people can't get in there. We must probably avoid having people drinking or shooting drugs up underneath the bridge. But in terms of litter and other general mess, I mean, how do we maintain that space?
The drawings show like a metal, as you say, a metal mesh going underneath with a maintenance access gate, and then these areas will be maintained as part of the public realm by the council with appropriate regimes to go in there and clear as necessary. There will be pretty much restricted access to that lower area completely for the public. There's defensive planting and knee rail fencing, so there won't be people using those areas. So there'll be very little likelihood of litter going into there, I would say, in the first place. But as per the whole Copperworks site, there's public realm to be maintained. There is also an active and engaged friends group that are helping to manage the site at the moment with the council.
So when you say defensive planting, you mean places where people can hide?
No, defensive planting is a term typically used by the police, secure by design, is planting to deter people to go through. So prickly shrubs, for example.
Any other member wish to speak? No? No? Sure. No one on screen. Okay, we'll see the recommendation there, as Mr. Smith has said, that the application be approved subject to the conditions below and any directions from CADU. We take a vote on that now then, please.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Bill Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Sarah Keaton.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
For.
Mark Tribe.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
And Paul Lloyd.
For.
Unanimous, Chair.
That's carried unanimously. Thank you so much. And then we move on then to item 3, which is cobwebs in Penmain, and that's yours, Chris, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so this planning application relates to a residential dwelling called Cobwebs, which is located in Penmain in the Gower. We obviously did a site visit yesterday. I think quite a few members were there. So the site is located within the open countryside and within the Gower AUNB. And in summary, planning permission is sought to demolish the existing building and erect a new dwelling and garage of contemporary design. The application has been subject to quite a few objections from local residents. The number of objection letters totals, I think there were 5 objection letters to the initial consultation exercise, together with a petition of 40 objections. And then there were a further 3 objection letters when we republicised the application following the receipt of amended plans. The details relating to the objections and more importantly, the points of objection are set out in detail at pages 104 to 117 of the report. We've not had any objections from consultees. All of them are relatively happy with the proposed development. In terms of the building itself, I'll come on to the visuals in a bit, but the proposed dwelling is quite large. It's a maximum of 25 metres wide and 14 metres deep, although the depth of the building does incorporate a first floor overhang to the front and some rear projections coming off the rear at single story level only. In terms of materials, we've got a combination of stone, charred larch, concrete panels, and there's a high level of glazing with green roofs to the majority of the roof of the main part of the building and the garage. In terms of the principle of development, the replacement of dwellings within the open countryside is supported in the LDP, and policy CV3 is the relevant one for us to consider, and that does support the erection of replacement dwellings subject to a number of criteria. The proposed development has been assessed against those criteria at page 116. Page 116 of the report also explains the energy efficiency credentials of the proposal. So in summary, we've not got any objection to the demolition of the existing dwelling. We're also satisfied with the design, form and mass of the proposed development. But as I say, we'll have a look at the visuals in a second, so I'll go into that in a bit more detail then. In terms of residential impact, we don't think that there is going to be an adverse impact on any of the neighbours. There are two houses located opposite the site, which you can see on the location plan. The houses to the north of the site, they are some 34 metres from the nearest point of the proposed dwelling. And the house to the east, which is the house called Shorelands, the actual development is moving further away from there when you compare it to the existing house. Again, I'll show you the plans. It'll probably make more sense in a second. There are no highway safety concerns. The access arrangements will remain largely as they are. Obviously, there's no increase in the number of dwellings. We've not had any objections from our highways team. In terms of ecology, preliminary roost assessment has been carried out and found no evidence of bats, and a series of ecological enhancement measures will be provided as part of the proposal. There are two large trees within the front part of the site, which we'll see from the site photos when we go through the slides. They are to be retained and they are to be protected during the construction phase of the development. That's addressed by means of a suitable planning condition. So if you can have a quick look at the slides then, please, Ian. As I say, it'll probably make a bit more sense. So that slide there, that shows the existing footprint of the dwelling. So as you can see by its very irregular and large footprint, the property, as we saw yesterday on site, has been extended numerous times. At a guess, I would suggest it's probably been extended about 5 or 6 times over the course of however long. The original the original dwelling would have been quite a nice building with quite a bit of character. It was built side onto the road, so the front elevation of the original dwelling faced eastwards, but there have been a series of extensions built in front of it, to the side of it and to the rear. So if you can bear that in mind, the next slide shows that there, obviously, that's the application site. The two trees I referred to are the two trees you can see directly in front of you. The main dwelling there you can see, which is the 2-storey element. You can see in part the extension which has been erected in front. That's only one of a series of front extensions. Go on to the next slide, please, Ian. Again, another shot of the site. You can see the extent of the trees there. They're actually very large. And again, you can probably see more of the extensions to the front of the dwelling. Now, this photograph shows on the right-hand side, you can see the application site. So the front elevation of the 2-storey part of the house. On the left is the neighbouring property called Shorelands. That is the kind of far right-hand side of it. In between the two properties, there's an access lane which is served by that timber gate, and to the side of that you can actually see there's a footpath. I think you can probably just make out the signpost of the footpath. So there's quite a decent separation between the two neighbouring dwellings. The next slide, I think, Ian, shows. Oh, again, this is now looking across the site. So again, the two trees are in the foreground. The background, you've got the neighbouring property and the front extension of the application site. This is the neighbouring property. So this house was recently renovated and extended. So you can see they've gone for a contemporary and modern approach, which obviously is quite different to the other properties within the settlement of Penmain, but we've put that in just for context purposes. Okay, so back to the drawings. If you can, there's a red outline on that plan. which indicates the footprint of the existing dwelling. So obviously the proposed dwelling is featured in the middle part of the drawing. The proposed garage is in the top left-hand corner. So you can see from the drawing that the actual building, although it is admittedly higher than the existing dwelling, it is coming further away from that eastern boundary. So it is being moved quite a bit off the common boundary with the pathway to the side. So the separation distance between the proposed dwelling and the neighbouring property is being substantially increased. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 19 metres. So this drawing is the front elevational drawing of the dwelling. The main body of the house is, if you look, concentrate on the two-storey element of the house. To the left of the two-storey element is a wall. That stone wall isn't part of the dwelling. That's an internal boundary wall. So if you look at the if you can draw your cursor again, where the left-hand edge of the two-storey element there. So anything from there across, that wall isn't part of the dwelling. That is an internal boundary wall, which will make more sense when I show you the layout drawings in a second. So the garage is in the right-hand corner. So that is basically what you would see if you were stood inside the site behind the garage, if you like. That's one of the side elevations. So this is the side elevation as seen from the neighbouring Shawlands property. That's the side elevation looking from the west. So again, you can see the cantilevered projection of the two-storey element on the front, and you can see the extent of the single-storey projection on the back. And then we've got the rear elevation. So the rear elevation obviously features a high proportion of glazing, obviously to take advantage of the views to the south, which look onto the coast and the sea. So you can see from there that the glazed element, that is basically the extent of the full width of the dwelling. The elements to the left and the right are walls and are not part of the dwelling. This drawing is a street scene drawing, which shows the height of the new dwelling relative to Shawlands. You can see from the drawings, it actually sits at a slightly lower level than the Shawlands property. And these are the floor plans. So if you want to skip through these, Ian. That's the a plan of the roof. As you can see, most of the roof there is a green roof. Part of the roof is going to be sedum. The other part is going to be wildflower grass. That's just a simple drawing of the garage to the front. And then you come on to the visual. So this is obviously the front elevation. So you can probably make out there the overhang of the first floor element beyond the ground floor element. I think the overhang is somewhere in the region of 2.5 to 3 meters. And if you go to the next slide, this should be the rear, and that's the rear. So you can see there the kind of staggered nature of the different floor levels. Okay, so it is a big structure. I mean, on the basis we don't think there's any impact on neighbours. There are no highway safety concerns, no ecological or tree impact concerns. We are largely, I think, focusing on today on whether we think the principle of the development is acceptable. We've got no concerns with the demolition of the existing building because it's been extended so much over the years. It's lost its original character and charm. So I think for those members who were on site yesterday, they would probably appreciate that, you know, having seen it inside and out. The the extent of the plot isn't changing, so the site of the boundaries of the site are not being extended. So I think today we purely need to concentrate on whether you think the design, form and general appearance of the dwelling is acceptable to the visual amenities of the area and the street scene in general. So I think that's perhaps what we need to focus on today, because, as I say, all the responses you've had from consultees all suggest that all the other aspects of the development is acceptable. So, but we've recommended approval, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, I got 3 speakers now anyway. Mr. David Patton is with us. No. It's objective first. Yeah. Thank you.
I should declare an interest in that I, with my family, have lived in Penmine Cottage, which is immediately across the road from the development, for the last 37 years. I'm representing, however, the comments of the community combined with those of the Gower Society and the Community Council. The present cobwebs, as you will have seen yesterday, is a small cottage, maybe getting on for 300 years old. The vast majority seen from the road, let's say that the frontal aspect, is single story of all these extensions that have been discussed. If you look from the road, less than 20% of the building as it stands at present is 2-story. The rest is all 1-story, and the only 2-story part is the original cottage, the end gable of the cottage. The replacement, which they claim is also single and 2-story, is in fact from the road entirely 2-story over its whole length. The single-story bit is an extension on the southern side towards the beach, extending out from the ground floor to increase the living area. So it's vastly more obtrusive than the present building. It's a large box shape, and you will know from the placemaking guidance, I think it's page 111 on your minutes, that replacement dwelling should not have a more significant impact than the existing buildings. This replacement has an enormous impact on the surrounding properties. Despite repeated claims in the access statements, none of the surrounding properties have been consulted at any stage, despite what they have said. And we would clearly have objected very strongly as a result. Now, the second part of that is that large square or overly long rectangular shaped plans should be avoided as they result in a single boxy building form. From the road, this just looks like an enormous dark brown or black shoebox. They state that it's shielded from the main road, the A4118, by trees. That is completely untrue. And we did send in some photo montages, which you may or may not have seen, the rest of the committee, showing what it is likely to look like, not only from the main road, but the properties opposite, and more importantly, from the top of Kevin Bryn and the tourist tracks on top of Kevin Bryn. It grossly affects the landscape, looking out to sea towards Great Tor, Oxwich Bay, and further around to the left, Three Cliffs Bay. So it's a vastly more obtrusive building. Now, it's certainly true that within Penmine, there are similar so-called contemporary buildings that have been built. All have been controversial. Some look as though they might be more suitable to be in Johannesburg with large, imposing iron gates and high walls, but none of them are within sight of the main road, and none are overlooked by other residential properties. So this would be a precedent that on the main A4118, as you drive through Park Mill, up through Penmine and beyond down to Gower, there is no similar building. It bears no relationship whatsoever to any of the surrounding buildings. Excuse me. I have also been asked to pass on 3 particular worries of the community. One is the small public right-of-way going down the side of the property, which curls around into the campsite and affords the only safe access for local people and tourists to go from the main road down to the campsite and onwards to the sand dunes and the beach. Many of the people in the area or tourists have young children with them. They have babies on their backs. If the only alternative, if that was to be lost, would be to walk along the main road. There are no paths along the main road. It is a dangerous road. Despite a 30-mile-an-hour limit, there's, as some of you will have seen yesterday, cars speed, unfortunately. Elderly people find it increasingly difficult to hear some of the electric cars, which are now coming round. I personally have had a son whose arm was hit by a wing mirror of a passing car. I've attended 2 accidents on the corner there. One was to pull a young man out from underneath a car that had overturned due to speeding. The second was a gentleman I treated for facial injuries on my hall floor after he came off his motorbike on that same corner, crashing into the wall next to it. So it's absolutely essential that we keep that. The initial planning suggested that they were going to use that for access for building materials and to close it. I know that has been redacted, but the community remain worried that there may be some compromise to that path. The second thing they've asked me to comment on are the cypress trees. They've already been mentioned, and you will know that the initial consultation was to remove one of those 2. Although there are 2 separate cypress trees, it forms one big mass, a huge tree, which is well known on South Gower, which hundreds of people see every day as they drive past it, coming up to work in Swansea from the lower part of the Gower. Now that has been redacted, and they say they're going to keep both trees, but we have a number of tree experts in the area. I'm a member of the Woodland Trust. If they're allowed to build too closely to that and damage the roots, the effect can be the same. The safe distance it should be built from the trees, you may wish to consult a tree expert, but if it's too close, it will damage the trees without a doubt. The
Can I
third
ask you to
thing,
wind up now, please?
I apologise.
Can you ask you to wind up now, please?
Oh yes, okay. The third thing I was going to say, the last point was simply that there remains, despite what has been said, there remains concerns that this would be an Airbnb or a bed. I know the application has gone in as a residence, but the configuration of the bedrooms and their nature, the number, all suggest that this could easily be used as holiday. Other than that, we feel that we need to protect the Gower as an area of outstanding natural.
Running.
So I have
double your time.
And to thank you very much.
Thank you
for listening to me.
Thank you very much. And my next speaker then is Mr. Glenn Thomas. Mr. Thomas, 5 minutes.
Yes. Hello there. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, sorry, just checking. We've had some audio issues this morning. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the committee and the chair for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of our clients, Mark and Edward Hayward, for this application. We are the architectural designers on the project. Forgive me, I've just written down my points within, it should only take 3 or 4 minutes, ones I wanted to get across. So a little bit by way of introduction, my name is Glenn Thomas. I'm the director of Glenn Thomas Architecture in South Wales. We're based in Penellan in Cardiff. We're a multi-award winning contemporary practice focusing on high quality sustainable architecture throughout the UK. Edward and Rebecca Hayward, the current homeowners, approached our practice back in November 22 to develop their newly acquired property, Cobwebs, in Penmine. Rebecca's from the Gower, and they wish to return with their young children to the area where they have lots of family. Her brother lives there, and her mum kindly welcomed us to site yesterday. The main attraction to Cobwebs was the beautiful plot, obviously, with wonderful views. and at this time it wasn't certain whether a development of the existing house or a replacement dwelling would be the most appropriate avenue for their new family home. It was soon determined, however, that the current building was such poor state of repair that it would be impossible to reach the carbon positive passive standard of sustainability that not just themselves but as the practice go for on every single project. Sustainability is at the heart of every aspect of the proposed eco-home. Much of the waste from the demolition will be reused. We will get a grubber on site and break up the stone to use as compact aggregate for the substructure. Along with the stone being crushed on site for the substructure and infill, the timber boards we aim to reuse for furniture or possible casting of board formed concrete. Wherever concrete is used, we do try and use cement replacement, fly ash byproduct from a power station. The property will benefit from the latest low energy technologies such as air source heat pumps, solar panels, high performing natural insulation, rainwater harvesting, high performance windows sourced locally, passive design with predominantly south facing glazing for solar gain in the winter, with overhangs to mitigate any overheating in the summer. We have a reflecting pool there, so this is very much follows our line of passive design where we have a central double height core through the centre of the property with a roof light and openings, and the air can come across the reflected pool and naturally ventilate the house. We have here smart home technology. The whole house systems will be specified along with local species meadowgrass roof, which was mentioned before, for water retention and also for biodiversity enhancement. Local materials and labour will be employed at every possible stage, both enhancing the sustainable ethos, but also to visually integrate the home with its surroundings. Recycling and repurposing of materials are things which are very close to Ed and Rebecca's heart. A strong biophilic design input will see the planting of internal trees, green walls, living green walls, with an abundance of appropriate planting surrounding the building. The LVIA deals extensively with all key elements employed to minimise the house's visual impact on the surrounding area. The proposed roof design is flat, thereby reducing the ridge line by approximately 2.5 metres than a standard two-storey pitched roof house. So if you see shorelands next to it on the street scene, if that same proportion was adopted on this site, the ridge would be 2 metres higher. So we really have tried in every order to lower the visual impact, to sink it into the site. We've moved the footprint further south on the site, thereby allowing us to drop the ground floor by 1 metre, again, trying to make it sit within the site rather than on it. Also, during the design process, we've moved south, cover that. The natural materials chosen for the external facade are intended to reflect an agricultural style of language. So whilst we appreciate the comments on the boxy nature, we have burnt larch, timber fins and a natural stone wall underneath, which in our mind gives an agricultural language which is suitable for the area. The design sits within rather than on the plot. So in summary, this is to be an architecturally innovative, highly sustainable family home, future-proofed for low energy and longevity, and one which will set high sustainability standards for the homeowners, ourselves, and hopefully for the council to be proud of. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Councillor James, you got your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And thank you to all the councillors who braved the rain yesterday to visit the property. It was appreciated. I'd call the application in because I was concerned about the visual amenity on Gower, and I wanted the members of this committee to actually see the location and the impact it would have on what is the main road into Gower. So I want to raise just a few points. First of all, as Chris said, nobody's objecting to the demolition of the present building. It's obviously would take a lot of work to bring it up to scratch, and it has so many extensions upon extensions. It really didn't work as a building. The issue is the design of the proposed new building. The Gower Place making guidance actually says, as I said before, a replacement property shouldn't have more impact on the street scene than the original property. This obviously is much bigger. It's 2-storey right across the whole width. It is going to have far more impact upon anybody driving along that road and the local residents. It also says that large box style design should be avoided. Well, it's the only way you could describe this. It's a large box. Although it might have different cladding along the front of it, it's still a large box in different wrappers. We're concerned that if this is passed, it then sets a precedent and we could have more such buildings right along the main road in prominent positions. I know there are a few around, but they are set back off the road. They're not so in your face of the public. Right. A quote. In 2022, this council refused an application from a neighbouring property to this one called Seven Lights. That was just to change the small dormers on the roof into one large dormer. This council refused it on the grounds that it would affect the character and appearance of the area and the natural beauty of Gower and the A1B. This went to appeal and it was upheld by the Welsh Government. So if a small change to a property that had been there for some time was turned down because of the effect it had on the environment and the natural beauty of Gower, then what would a building of this size do to the natural beauty of Gower? The other point I wanted to raise was the concern about the protection of the two iconic mature cypress trees. They really are a landmark along that road. All I can say is what we don't want to not have a new building there. What we want is perhaps a different design, one that could still contain all the environmental features that they want to put into it, but a different design. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. First off, any members wish to speak? Can't see the screen. Oh, Councillor George, sorry.
Can we have the photograph or whatever it was of the house next door? I don't know if you can put the two together somehow. You know, the proposed one and the proposed one was just what I've forgotten the name of it. The one we just cobwebs I'm looking at. Shorelines I wanted to see. Shorelines I wanted to see.
So James,
oh, sorry.
Wanted to see the impact. You know, we saw the right of way beside it.
that drawing's
I got my back to the mic trying to see the screen. You know, is Shorelines just that grey bit, or is it the bit next to it as well?
So
Go back.
yeah, Shorelands is that's the extreme right hand side of Shorelands.
Yeah, so the other bit join is also Shorelands.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, Ian, you'll see next one after that. Yeah, so Shorelands is the grey element with the gable roof with a single window. Obviously he's got the darker element there, and then he's got a single story projection in front. So all of that is Shorelands, yeah.
Thank you. And flip back now to the photograph of cobwebs, the proposed one.
So between the two plots, you've obviously got the gap of with the access lane and the footpath. Yeah, I think that gap is somewhere in the region of about 3 or 4 meters, I think.
Okay. No, thank you. Right. Any other member wish to speak? No. Just there were a few points raised at them, weren't there, Chris? The footpath, trees, the design.
Yeah, so in terms of the footpath, I mean, the footpath lies outside of the plot, so that will not be affected by the proposed development. In fact, the buildings come in much further away from the footpath. The existing building, it it extends very, very close to the boundary of the footpath. The proposed dwelling is going to be sitting off it quite substantially. So that, yeah, the right of way will not be affected by the development. In terms of the impact on the trees, the applicant submitted an arboricultural impact assessment report as part of the application. Alan Webster, a tree officer, has looked at that, and he is content with the findings of that report. And that report also contains a tree protection plan, and I think we've imposed a condition 8. I think it was condition 8, which basically says the construction phase of the development has got to be carried out in accordance with the tree protection plan that forms part of that report. So, yeah, as the building, as I mentioned earlier, is actually set further away from the trees. So, but it's obviously the construction phase of the development where we need to be careful, I think. In terms of the actual dwelling itself, I mean, the footprint of it is actually smaller than the footprint of the existing building, but the overall mass and height of the building is clearly bigger. But if you go back to the layout drawing, I mean, if you compare the size of the proposed dwelling relative to the plot, I mean, I think it's fair to say it sits quite comfortably within the plot. I mean, there's plenty of space to the front and to the rear. I mean, the plot is quite large. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it is quite a big building, but I mean, it takes up quite a small proportion of the plot. It's large garden area to the rear and obviously large area for parking to the front. So I don't think we can argue that it's an overdevelopment of the site. It's clearly bigger than the existing dwelling, but when you put it in context of the site, it kind of works without being cramped. I think the issue of precedent was mentioned. Obviously, we've got to take each application on its own merits. I mentioned policy CV3 earlier, which is the policy which relates to replacement dwellings in the countryside. One of the criteria in that requires us as planning officers to have regard to the existing character of the dwelling. So where you've got an existing dwelling of high amenity value for argument's sake with a bit of character, then we would look to resist the demolition of that. So, but obviously in this case, we don't think that applies given the form and extended nature of the property. Other dwellings within Penmain, no doubt we would want retained if a similar application came in, but in this case, I think we've got no option other than to allow the demolition of the existing property. So each case is determined on its merit. And I think there was also a suggestion that the property may be used as a holiday let. Now, again, we've got to consider the application at face value. It's been submitted as a residential dwelling. My understanding is that the applicants who live abroad at the moment are returning to the UK to live in the dwelling when complete. But so I've got no reason to think that it's not going to be used as anything other than a dwelling at this stage. If the use changed in the future, we'd obviously have to deal with that. But we've got to take it at face value as things stands. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this explanation there, Chris. I've got no other member wish to speak, no? Okay. Okay, so then you can see the recommendation there on page 123 is to approve this application. I'll take that vote now.
Peter Black,
4.
Bill Downing,
4.
Alan Jeffrey,
4.
Mary Jones,
4.
Sarah Keaton,
4.
Mike Lewis,
4.
Richard Lewis gone, Mark Tribe,
4.
Andrew Williams,
4.
Paul White.
4.
9-4, Chairman, unanimous.
It's carried, and thank you very much. Well then, yeah, unfortunately we have a meeting in here at 4 o'clock. So, but we've got 2 other items, which, and I know you've got to be there. Well, what,
How long's that?
well, are we going to deal with these two in that time?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Nothing to add, so.
What do you want to do? Deal with them or do you want to?
Chris, you got nothing to add to the reports, have you?
No, I'll try and be as quick as possible.
Well, yeah, I'm just wary of.
No, the last one's really just a, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, do we?
I think we do. Yeah, we do.
All right, then if you think we can, I'm just waiting, Chris. Sorry, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
I'm just holding it up otherwise.
Yeah, the first of these two refers to Bridleway in Llanmaddock. We had an application a couple of years ago from the neighbouring landowner or neighbouring co-landowner about the Bridleway route being incorrect. When I looked into their allegation, I did find that there was an error. And what's happened is because when our original map was drawn in the 1980s, it was drawn at such a small scale. And the layout of this farm has changed over the years, which means that it was quite difficult for the person drafting the map to work out which side of the boundary it should be. And it ended up going on the wrong side of the boundary. So basically what I brought this to committee to decide on is whether the Bridleway should go on the one side of the boundary or the other. And my findings are that it should go on the boundary on the east side of the boundary, whereas at present it's shown on the west side of the boundary. So our records, in my opinion, are incorrect. So I'm recommending that we make a modification order to change the route of the Bridleway so that it goes on the east side onto another landowner's property. That landowner has has responded to the report. That response is in the appendices. I've known the landowner for quite a long time, and we are in negotiations with her for a diversion which will take the Bridleway away from this area completely, which would be more convenient for people using it and more convenient for her as well, because it will no longer go through the farmyard.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Chris? So,
I'm just not clear. Looking at the map on the diagram, page 131, which is the route we're going for? The dotted line or the blue line?
Yeah, so the dashed line is where it's shown on the maps currently.
Which one? The dotted line?
The dotted line, yeah. And the solid line is where I consider it should have been recorded.
Right. So we're no longer going through buildings, we're going around the buildings.
Well, yes, well, there's two errors actually. I didn't mention the other one. Yeah, I mean, it's been drawn in such a way that it actually goes through two buildings, which, as I've indicated on the plan, were built or were in existence in at least 1916.
Yeah.
So the path could never have gone there. So there's clearly an error there.
Yeah. Paragraph 2.1 is very disturbing, I have to say. We're talking about an unqualified draft person who is insufficiently supervised. It could cost us tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, it's too late to go back now. It's 36, 7 years ago.
Yeah, okay. That's fine, Chair, thanks.
any other member wish to speak? No? Okay, well, thank you for that, Chris. You can see the recommendation there on page 128, that the order be made to correct the error.
Peter Black.
Oh, 4.
Bill Downing.
4.
Alan Jeffrey.
4.
Mary Jones.
4.
Sarah Keaton.
4.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Mark Tribe.
4.
Andrew William.
4.
And Paul Lloyd.
Yeah, and 4. Thank you.
Unanimous again.
It's unanimous. And then the final one then is another item in Cleve.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry to have to bring this to the committee because it is really just a dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's.
Can we just
jobby.
move this, Chair? 'Cause I think it's quite clear from the report, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Basically, we're rejecting the modification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm moving to rejected the modification. Yeah.
Yeah, we're refusing the application because we already have a footpath, so there's not much point in pursuing it any further.
Okay, you can see the representation.
Yeah.
And we can take a vote on that.
Yeah, councillor Pete Black,
4.
Phil Downing. Alan Jeffrey,
Four.
Mary Jones,
Oh, we've gone up.
Sarah Keaton,
Or
Mike Lewis,
4.
Mark Tribe,
4.
4.
and Paul.
That's 4.
Chair.
Thanks very much. Thank you all. I know that you're watching the clock as you've got your meeting and you're at 4 o'clock.
10 minutes, Ed.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to beg your pardon.